So I forget the book. What is it? Beyond Good and Evil. Nietzsche. Nietzsche. Anyway, one of them there books. He starts off in German. I don't know what that is, but if truth were a woman, what then? Though it's interesting that in German, certain nouns are feminized that are not feminized in English, so there's that too. But if truth were a woman, what then? And the major mistake religious people make about Nietzsche is that he proclaimed the death of God, but that's not at all what happened. There's two things. One is he proclaimed the criticism of the supposed death of God. He proclaimed the death of the false God. He proclaimed, first of all, the death of God. God's not dead. We have killed him, you and I. Whither is God? He cried. The madman. Whither is God? He cried. We killed him, you and I. Okay, so that's a reference. That's part of the quote, like Nietzsche creates this character, the madman. And the madman says, whither is God? Where? Whither? Where? Whence? Whither? Whither is God? Whither? A shrinking God. Whither is God? He cried. Cried. Jesus wept. Whither is God? He cried. We killed him, you and I. So that's a reference to Christ. And if you're Christian, like, even Peter denied Christ. No contemporary of Jesus saved Christ. And even Christ was a Jew. They were all Jews, so to call them Christians is kind of funny, but no one saved him. All the women were there to soothe him, to help him, to do what they could for him. All the women were there while every man fled. What if truth were a woman, what then? If truth were a woman. So, basically, people think of, like, Nietzsche as, like, this anti-archangel of, essentially, at the extreme end, what people call Satanism. But that's not it at all. It's all of Nietzsche is a thinly wafer thin, a thinly veiled critique of the last, in his time, 1800 years of religion plus. Who killed God? The Romans. Who killed God? The Jews. Who killed God? The Christians. By default, in denial. Judas was a Christian. Judah. Peter denied him. couldn't save him. Couldn't raise the force within himself, nor raise the force within others. And then what if truth were a woman? That's a thinly veiled reference to Mary. In Luke, supposedly, the praise of Mary is derided. Protestants tend to hate the praise of Mary. That's a mistake. Because we worship the Father and we worship the Son. People will talk about it all day long. Worship the Father, worship the Son, worship the mom. Oh no. Oh, she cool and everything, but yeah, we worship the Father and the Son. If truth were a woman, what then? That's why the Renaissance is secretly encoded a massive praise to Saint Agnes. Raped, burnt alive, decapitated. Chosen. What Agnes represents is Mary and Jesus in one symbol. You'll have to do your homework on that. But anyway, I wasn't going to make any more of these videos. I'm trying to work on my little book. I'm trying to make a nice little simple book. It's not going very well. The Vegan Cross. And I'm like, I'm trying to shut myself down right now. I'm like, Jeff, don't do this. Why are you talking? Erase this. Maybe I will. But another part of me is like, fight. It's worth it. Because I learned a lot today. Father in Latin is pater. And even though it's only one T, like, it's related to pattern. which a lot of times we associate with the ground. And I'm speaking kind of either mathematically or physically, like the background. Some physics is background dependent, some physics is background independent, which is a little bit like, is there or isn't there an ether? Well, there is. But the pater isn't the ether. The mater is the ether, the mother. So God the Father and God the Son, yes. God the Father, the Creator. But the Creator must create upon a ground. There are mathematical, physical, geometric rules and laws, most fundamentally, that cannot be violated. So the Father is the pattern of dynamics. The Father is the pattern of expressed movement upon the ground and the underground, the structure of the earth, so to speak, Mother Earth. The pattern, not the pattern. Because there's the dynamic pattern. It's kind of like if you've ever seen those John Conway of Game of Life animations, right? Those are the patterns. But there's a structure upon which those patterns are made. In the case of the Game of Life, there's a structure and a rule. Or a series of rules as one rule. And we always talk about the Cartesian grid. Well, it's not a Cartesian grid, though Cartesianality can be superimposed on it. I want to say topologically imposed on it, but I'm thinking more of a 3+ dimensional allegory of topology. So whatever topology does on quote unquote 2 dimensions, whatever the multi-dimensional equivalent of that is, Cartesianality can be stuffed into it. I was listening to a book on veganism today written by a French author. It was in English, but it was originally written by a French author, and I was very, very surprised because it's a recent book, recent within the last 10 years. And I was very surprised on the arguments about, like, animals as machines. And it made me realize something I'd never realized before, because it was talking about something that I thought was a dead issue in America. I mean, obviously, it's not by all the barbecue places around, but by any thinking person. I thought animals as not machines was a dead issue, but apparently in France, it's still alive and well. And I was like, what the fuck? And then I realized, oh yeah, Descartes. Like, we prize the people who are close to us. So I'm sure Fermat, Descartes, all that. I thought that was pretty interesting. All Alright, I got some time. I haven't even touched what I was gonna talk about. I never do. So I'm trying to make a simple book. I'm trying to make something that's just like to tink, to tink, to tink, to tink. But I should remind myself, in a sense, I've broken a code. Not just a 2,000-year-old code. I've broken a 10,000-year-old code. But the structure of it is so big, and the lightning storm is so vast, that trying to say it discreetly now, just to say I've broken it, that don't mean shit. Don't confuse, right, the movie Goonies. Like, little Mikey's the hero of Goonies. Awesome. And he got a few rubies at the end of it that saved the day. Awesome. But don't confuse Mikey with One-Eyed Willie. Right. Or don't confuse Charlie in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Like, don't confuse Charlie with Willy Wonka. Don't confuse Mikey with One-Eyed Willie. Mikey didn't build that ship. Mikey didn't pillage that gold. Mikey didn't sail across the ocean. But Mikey did what Mikey did. Awesome. And Charlie, he didn't harvest that sugar. He didn't build that chocolate stream. And he did some bad shit. Did what he wasn't supposed to. But he did what he was supposed to do and got what he was supposed to get. I'm only shaking my head because I don't know if I have the energy and the time. If I had the time, I could summon the energy. And if I had the energy, I could stuff it into the allotted time. So I'm just going to have to give it a shot. I'm pissed off. I was pissed off recently at Luke. Luke in the Bible. Because he said that after Jesus rose from the dead, he ate a fish. And to me, I was like, you dumb motherfucker, you son of a bitch, Luke, you fucking bastard motherfucker. Pissed me off. Even though, alright, there's so many codes built into the Bible. I'm trying to pare it down into a few. The moral code, the mathematical code, the alchemical, scientific code. So from the mathematical code, no problem. From the scientific code, alchemical code, no problem with Luke at all. None. But from the moral code, I'm like, Luke, you son of a bitch, you motherfucking bastard. So I had to work on that some. So I've spent the last week trying to discredit Luke, and I found that I can. Alright, so here's a couple things in Luke. One is I was reading about the Last Supper in Luke, right? That's like Luke 22-ish. Luke 22 something. You know, Luke 21, 22, Last Supper. And then Luke 24 plus is Jesus arising, eating the fish. Pissed me off. So I looked into it. So this is what I've been up to the last couple days. I found a little something. I ain't quite killed it, but I've given it a lethal blow. We'll see if it's fatal. Alright, it's just like, now this is super important, upside down cross, right? Everybody always like, Satan, 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 upside down cross, Satan. Bear with me. Yeah, upside down cross. Alright. So Peter was crucified on an upside down cross. Right? That's the Catholic Church rundown. Some Protestants who are into the Bible are like, that was in the Acts of Peter, an apocryphal text. Though, alright, so the Acts of Peter is an apocryphal text that's not found in the original Bible. However, the oldest actual physical document of the Acts of Peter is older than the oldest found actual documents of 1 Peter and 2 Peter that are in the Bible. Though they're a little bit more fantastical, which is probably why what people call the Nicene Council, it's probably why it was left out. Not because it was less true, but because it was temporarily or temporaneously inefficacious. The Acts of Peter was left out then so that this package could be delivered to now, when the Acts of Peter could be found. But anyway, dark motherfucker stole this shit, steal it back. Same thing with the swastika. It don't mean what our view of history thinks it means. The pipeline of what we call history is a weapon against us. But in that sense, people know the upside down cross, right? People know the upside down cross. They see that and they're like, hey, Christians, millions of Christians would see an upside down cross and be like, yeah, millions, and wouldn't know that Peter was crucified on an upside down cross. That's where the symbol came from. And you can debate over the religiosity, the historiosity of it, but it's unequivocal. For over 1,000 years, this has been the symbol of Peter. And only for the last several, decades has it been associated with what people call Satanism. Anyway, Peter in the Greek, because people always talk about the Bible being like Greek and Hebrew, never mind that Jesus spoke Aramaic, and never mind all the other languages, all this shit was boiling around in that entire region. It's a pretty big region, but the part of the Mediterranean that hugs up upon Turkey and Rhodes, island of Turkey, and Black Sea, Red Sea, Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, Ethiopia. So I guess it's a pretty big region, but still, it's still never mind everything that's happening in Malaysia. For some reason that doesn't get into the Bible, even though it's only just from here to there. And then you have this whole way more interesting fucking string of islands and so on. Imagine if we had all that history. Imagine if that was the book that was left instead of this one. But this is the one we got, so it's the one we gotta fucking deal with. Because of Aristotelian final causes, which is what a philosopher might say. And a religious person might say the omega, which is to say the pole of the future, the pole of the endpoint, the pole of the purpose. Nothing is done without a purpose. So we're always talking about stimulus response. And we speak about it specifically in stimulus response scenario where we're talking about the stimulator. But rarely do we take it from the responsor's standpoint, which is to say, you as something being stimulated. If you're stimulated poorly, the whole goal is to get beyond the result of that negative. If it's a negative stimulation, it's to get beyond that negative stimulation so you can get back on track to your fucking goal. Goals pull things. The future pulls things. We are pulled to the future. But anyway, man, I don't know if I'm gonna get there, but maybe that's not important. Yeah, I haven't even started. Fuck. All right, Peter, Saul the Paul. Right? Peter, I build this church on this rock, whatever. Peter, from Saul to Paul, or from, well, what is it? In Greek it's Petros. Peter, Petros. To Paul. I don't know what Paul is in Greek, but I always associate him with Apollo or Apollonius. But that might be wrong. Polar, Polaris. I guess that's probably Latin, but... But yeah, Paul and... But stone in Greek is Kepha. And then I guess... Oh wait, no, I'm mixing up Paul and Peter. I'm calling Saul the Paul when it's Shimon. Shimon? I don't know how to pronounce it. To Peter. And Peter means rock, stone. Petros in Greek. But in Aramaic, it's transliterated as Cephas, Cephas, Cephas's stone. My understanding is one of the old Greek translations, like way old school, maybe 1,000-year-old Greek translations of the Bible has Peter named as Kephas, Kephas. So that ties together the C and the K, where you have Cephas and Kephas, meaning the same thing, where the C and the K are connected, even though they're connected later in time in English and in the Romantic languages. But that speaks to the omega point, that speaks to the teleological pole of the future, that the future informs the past. That the future and the past are a feedback loop through eternity. Kind of like in mathematics, complex spirals on the complex plane, or going in and out of the four quadrants of what could be thought of space and time. If we think of I as time and R as space. Not that we should, but it's a decent analogy. But anyway, yeah, Sefa. Oh wait, no. Sefa. Goes backwards in Aramaic, just like Hebrew. Sefa, Greek, Kepha. And more or less Hebrew, I guess, would be about the same thing as like Sifa, because there's no Peter equivalent, Petros in Greek. I wanted to get into Luke. All right, can I crank it up? Can I crank it up? Not today, but yeah, I'm gonna have to get to Luke. And where Jesus ate the fish. But Jesus didn't eat no fish. In Greek, it's isthos, isthos, isthos. But he would have been speaking Aramaic, and supposedly in Aramaic and Hebrew of that time, the word noon, or something like that. Noon, none, noon. But if you take, so Jesus would have been speaking Aramaic, but we always consider everybody Jewish or Hebrew. Hebo. But like if you basically take a cross between some of the typographies of Noon, which looks a little bit like a U with a dot over it, but some of the typographies of it look like kind of a U with one side up a little more and the dot not quite in the center. It looks a lot like a lowercase j. And a lot of the typographies of the Hebrew Noon look like a uppercase J. Noon, none, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. None. If truth were a woman, what then? But anyway, apparently that word, more specifically than fish, means propagation, which in the mathematical code would likely mean multiply. It probably means exponentiation, so multiplication by exponentiation in math. And certainly the fish, and in Luke it says, blah blah blah, I gave him a broiled fish. I've been looking into broiled. I can't find the etymology of that. I can't find any explanation of that. How would someone of that time period in that region have broiled something? I've never seen that before. I've never heard of that before. Yeah, that word noon means propagation, and in the Strong's Concordance it references propagation by shoots. But propagation by shoots is also related to propagation by cuttings, propagation by runners. And I'm going to leave that as a hanging diphthong.